From the darkest corners of the creepy old house down the street to the screams in the night. Settle in, Parafamily, to join with Whitney and Brandon for another spooky episode of the Para-Unity Podcast.
Hello, Para-Family. What is up?
Hello.
This is Brandon, as always.
And Whitney, also, as always.
Whitney.
Everyone's having a great day and a great night.
Exactly. Whitney,
Yes.
how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I've been really busy getting my books back up online and working on a third one about a certain single location that I happen to have a very healthy obsession over. So very excited about that.
The Bridgewater Triangle.
No.
No, that was my
I'm
first
not St. Albans Sanatorium.
Ha! I knew you'd say it.
Yes. You wanted me to say it. I'm saying it.
I wanted to know.
Well, now you know.
Whitney, so tonight, this is going to be a wild ride. I hope everybody listening sticks tight, because not only do we have a special guest on the show, but we are talking about something that you are super, super excited about.
Oh, yes. I'm telling you, it's my favorite. So everybody remember back at Halloween when Brandon and I regaled all of you with their favorite urban legends. Well, I didn't get a chance to share my absolute favorite one. So I get a chance to do it tonight. But as Brandon says, we actually have a special guest by our side. So buckle up, my friends. Right, Brandon?
Absolutely. So I want you guys to try and guess what it is. So
guess what my favorite urban legend is. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So stop us if you've heard this one.
Okay.
So a lone male driver is cruising down a dark road in the middle of the night. His tired eyes perk up when he sees a figure of a young woman standing by the side of the road. So he pulls over to see if she's okay. She's all alone and appears to need help. So this man offers to give the young woman a ride. She slides up into the back seat and gives the man an address. So he drives off, checking his rearview mirror ever so often, trying to engage her in conversation, but she just sits there remaining silent. Finally, he arrives at the address, but the home is decrepit and dark in repair. He turns to confront her and ask her a question, and she has vanished into thin air. Anybody want to take a guess?
Anybody? Who do we have on the chat tonight? Come on.
We got Miss Betsy on there.
Hey, Betsy. I know Betsy can guess this one.
I know she can.
She knows it.
Throwing up the ghost symbols. Well, I know you've heard of this one, Para-Family, or at least something like it before. It's all around the world, in the United States, in the country where our dear guest is from, as well as other places as well. So where else? Around the campfire, at a slumber party, on a school bus. Welcome to the world of the Vanishing Hitchhiker. Woohoo! Whitney's all excited, got the thumb up, ready to go. Before we dig into this, I
actually have a hitchhiker's thumb.
You kind of do.
I kind of do.
I don't. Yeah. Well, I guess I kind of do.
Yeah.
I show my leg.
That will get people to drive quickly.
Yeah, they kind of do. I haven't figured that part out. Maybe our guest knows why.
Yes. Who's our guest?
Our guest is the beautiful, the talented, claiming from Tianjin, China. Weighing in at I don't know what, but he's still my favorite person. Please welcome Xander.
Yes! What's up, y'all? Hi.
Hi,
I have no idea why anybody would keep driving if they saw Brandon's hairy leg poking out the side of a street. Like, I mean, that would stop traffic. That would stop traffic, right?
It's got all the beautiful tattoos on it. I mean,
it'll cause an accident.
I have like an immediate question. I have an immediate question. Ghosts always disappear into thin air. Like, what's that about? Like, what's thin air? Is there like, are there ghosts that disappear into thick air? Is there thick air out there for ghosts to disappear? What is thick air and what is thin air? These are the
So
questions I have.
That's
If
a
you come to
fantastic question.
Iowa, anytime during the summer, actually yesterday was really bad, but anytime during the summer or the fall, we have a lot of humidity. So that would be
So
thick
that's
air.
the thick air. Okay, so
That's very
ghosts
thick air.
aren't keen on humidity. Like ghosts are like,
No.
I'm out. Like,
No,
yeah.
they get wrinkly.
Well, although
Okay,
the ghosts
okay.
do tend to like, ghosts do tend to like New Orleans and Savannah, Georgia, and places where there's tons of humidity too. So
There's tons of humidity here in summer as well in China. It is like walking in soup out there. Like
Yep.
it is walking like chunky soup, you know, not like a thin soup, a chunky
Yes.
soup. Yeah.
yeah,
I'm
it's-
Like when you get out the
thicker air
shower
is harder
and
to
you actually have to
disappear.
when you get out the shower and you have to take another shower because you're already sweating in the shower. Yeah, it's that kind of
Yeah.
humidity.
relatable.
Never drives. This gets super curly. Yeah.
Mine too.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, right.
My curly hair gets curlier, if you know what I'm saying. Okay.
And we're going right to that to start off the show.
You knew it was going to happen, Brandon.
Like he's making pube jokes. Like what? In 10 minutes? I've been here 10 minutes. He was already talking about his pubes. Come on.
6.5.
Oh boy. Oh, we're gonna, like I said, friends, parafamily, buckle up tonight.
Buckle your shit up. Buckle your shit up.
Buckle up, mind the gap,
Buckle
and
it
all
up.
that. So
I have a fun story. I've got two stories, very quick stories about hitchhiking.
Okay.
One of them in South Africa, where I grew up, the distance between things is huge. So if you want to go from like home to like, let's just say like a supermarket, you can't walk. The distance is way too great. Like I'm from rural South Africa, right? So the distance between things is huge. And of course, as a teenager, I wasn't allowed to drive, and there is no public transport available. There's like one bus, and it comes at 7 a.m. So if you're not going anywhere at 7 a.m, you're not going anywhere for the rest of the day. So we would hitchhike. This is back when, you know, in the 90s when it was okay to hitchhike. And we were hitchhiking back from the store one day because we'd gone to buy, you know, cigarettes or weed or whatever it is you buy when you're a teenager. And a guy picked us up and we sat in the back of the car. And about halfway into the journey, he was chatting with us and I looked over. He had no hands. He had these two claw things hooked onto the steering wheel. No, I mean, I don't, you know, exactly right, Whitney? Like, I don't like, I mean, obviously people with disabilities, okay. Like, you know, but when you're in the back of somebody's car and you look over and the dude doesn't have any hands and he's the one that's driving, you're like, oh shit, what have I done? And he was a little bit weird about the whole thing as well. So initially sitting in the back, we were like, oh, this guy's a little bit creepy, you know? And then you look over and find out that he's got claws instead of hands as well. And you're like, okay, this is where we get out in the middle of the country road. Yes, no, I'm just by that bush over there. We'll get out over there. It was an experience. And then the second one, do you know that I found out, sorry, Whitney, go ahead. I'm talking too much.
The claws that you described, that reminds me of that seminal scene in one of my favorite movies, Adventures in Babysitting, with the guy with the truck driver guy that had these claw hooks for a hand.
That's what he had. He had
and
those.
they were just talking about the hook myth, about this hookman strikes the babysitter's face, scrape, scrape, scrape.
Yeah. What's that movie with the guy with it's my good hand, and he's stuffing, he's getting the mashed potato. Yeah. And then the second one, this is slightly more of a somber, sober one. But when September 11th happened, when 9/11 happened, we found out about it sitting in the back of a car that we were hitchhiking. And the guy, the only thing he said to us was, oh, World War III has started. And we were like, what? And he's like, yeah, World War III has started. They just flew planes into buildings in America. And that was all the information we had for like a 45-minute car ride. We were like in shock. World War III has begun. And I'm sitting in the back of a stranger's car. Like, it was nuts. It was nuts. So I've had some interesting hitchhiking experiences myself. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, hitchhiking is actually something that I have never done.
What? You have not lived. You have not lived. I totally recommend that after today's recording, you go out and you hitchhike somewhere, just anywhere. Whitney is not sold on the idea.
How about you wait a week?
Where would I go? Where would I go?
Let's wait a week so we can finish the season, and then
Yeah,
whatever-
yeah.
Before she disappears and is kidnapped.
I'm not going through that process again.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
you're not doing
Again.
that again.
And Whitney,
Yeah.
Betsy is a safety professional by trade. Betsy
Yes.
Kulikowski.
Okay.
She says, "Do not
Yes, yes,
recommend
yes.
that as a safety professional." And she also
No,
says, "Hi,
she
Xander."
Yeah, Betsy would probably be like, yeah, I am now going to remember my duties as a full-on safety
Betsy's
professional.
on-
Betsy's on the
listening now?
chat.
Hey,
Yes, she is.
Betsy. Hey, Betsy. One of my favorite authors is Betsy. If anybody's not read any of her books, I highly recommend. Pop onto Amazon, leave
I
5-star
thought you
reviews.
said you hadn't read them.
I have read them. I've read them. I'm waiting. I haven't read the new one. I
No,
got sent a
that's-
beta version. What are you talking about, Brandon? I got sent a beta version of one of her novels. I was a
I have
pre-reader, bitch. So step down, bitch.
Ooh.
How about the back cover, bitch?
Oh
Oh,
boy.
okay. Fine. Whatever.
How about I've been in a short story collection with Betsy Kulikowski.
Oh, look at
Biatch.
all of us vying for Betsy's approval. We're like, Betsy's here. Like, we're
However, as Betsy just put it, her new book will come,
Yes.
which is called The Pirate's Curse, will be
yes,
is now out for pre-orders on Amazon.
awesome.
So
So go and buy the book and give Betsy 5 stars because she deserves them.
she totally does.
Yes.
And also so does my lovely Vanishing Hitchhiker. Okay, so I've always liked this story. I've kind of liked it since the old campfire tale days when I was in Girl Scouts. This was one of the things that we talked about in Girl Scouts. And also this was one of the stories that I really loved when we started watching Are You Afraid of the Dark from Nickelodeon and the Midnight
Mhm.
Society. And there, for me, it kind of like appealed to my little sense of romance about, here's a girl walking down the side of the road. But the little did
You
I
have
know
a
how
warped sense
dangerous.
of romance, Whitney. Like that's a warped sense of romance.
I think
here's
most
a dead
people would
person.
tell you,
Oh.
yeah, she's not going to show you she's dead until she turns and looks at you with gaping skull. Anyway. But no. However, I am in anthropology. I do have a Bachelor of Arts in anthropology. And that was one of the favorite things that I studied in my folklore class when I studied for my bachelor's. So widespread awareness of the Vanishing Hitchhiker story, it peaked in 1981 with the publication of Jan Harold Brunbaum's book, The Vanishing Hitchhiker and Other Stories. However, he posits that the stories have existed before the invention of cars. So the first Vanishing Hitchhiker story came from a 400-year-old manuscript, which was translated to mean about the signs and wonders that preceded a liturgical event. And it was written by a Swedish priest. And I'm sorry, my Swedish is awful. I do apologize. But I think his name is it's either Johan or Johan Petri Klint. And according to Klint, in February of 1602, there was a priest and 2 farmers who were coming home from a Candlemas market. On their way home, they encounter a maid. And by maid, I mean a young woman. And she asked to go along with them. They didn't think that was weird. Everybody was going to town for the market. So they stopped at an inn for refreshments, and the maid requested a jug of beer. When the innkeeper fetched this beer the first time, it was filled with malt. Get it a second time, and the beer was filled with acorns. And for a third time, it was filled with blood. The maid then said that this year, 1602, will yield a lot of grain, and the trees will bear a lot of fruit, but there will be much war and disease. And with that prediction, she vanished into thin air.
I love the idea of a maid standing on the side of the street like this while people walk past. Can I walk with you guys? Is that how you hitchhiked back in the day? Just looking at the passers-by. May I?
Yeah. So what do you guys think of what do you guys think of that? Have you guys heard of something like that before?
Well,
I love that. It's interesting that these like folk tales go as far back and like pre the invention of the car, right? Like or wagons or things like that. Like you kind of associate hitchhikers with cars. Like you don't think about people standing on the side of the road like this, like a horse-drawn carriage coming past or anything like that. So I love the fact that they're a lot older than modern day folklore and urban legends. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I even heard of one story. So I read about this in another book once when I was a little girl, and I remember it very vividly because of the illustrations. It was actually set, it was, I think, in China.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a young woman that I think it was a merchant that was going through. And there was a young woman, a very beautiful and ethereal young woman by the side of the road. And when he asks her what's going on, she actually speaks back to him and says, I'm lost. I need to go home. And so he volunteers to escort her the rest of the way. And of course, he's feeling a little smitten because here's this vulnerable young lady by the side of the road.
Because he's going to get some. Yeah.
That I'm sure. I'm sure. Wow, Ben. We'll unpack that later, but
it kind of makes you wonder. No, okay, so it kind of makes you wonder. So all these like ghost hitchhikers or maidens or young ladies on the side of the street, they're always beautiful, alluring, gorgeous apparitions. So you kind of got to wonder, like, are there any like old ugly ones on the side of the street that people just don't know about because they just walk straight past? They're just like, yeah, I'm not going to tap that. Like,
I was like, are you really going to go after a toothless lady sitting on the side of the road?
Exactly. So there might be a lot more of these hanging out on the side of the street than we're even aware of because we just don't even give them a second look.
Funny you should mention that because when the Vanishing Hitchhiker was first analyzed, and this was actually back in 1942 and 1943, there was a study done by two American folklorists named Richard Beardsley and Rosalie Hankey. And they said that there are 4 standard versions of the hitchhiker story. So one of those versions is where the hitchhiker is an old woman who kind of gets a foretelling of disaster. And some people say that goes into a story, I believe, from Chicago about a woman named Mother Cabrini, who supposedly, let's see, I had a hard time finding really full-on details with this one, but I'm actually going to look at her. So Mother Cabrini, so her name was Frances Xavier Cabrini, and she was also known as Mother Cabrini. She was actually she was a nun from 1850 to 1917, and she was the first U.S. citizen to be canonized as a saint by the Catholic Church in 1946. Pretty cool, huh?
What is she? So what is she the saint of? Does it say like Cabrini? It's Italian, huh? Cabrini.
I'm on
yeah.
it.
So
Look that up because that's Chicago. Yeah. And the cool thing,
so she's probably the patron saint of deep dish pizza or something like that. Cabrini, the pizza.
I like that. Or she might, the projects from the Candyman movie, the original Candyman, Cabrini Green.
Ah, good point.
Yeah. Betsy actually says in her chat that in Oklahoma, one of their Vanishing Hitchhiker stories is about a young boy.
Okay. All right.
She is the patron saint of immigrants.
Oh.
Okay,
immigrants to America.
Immigrants to America. And Chicago was definitely a veritable melting pot. You had Italian.
Sure.
Yep. And there's her picture right there. We'll post
that.
I
wouldn't stop my car. I would not stop my car if that apparition was on the side of the street. I'd just be like, keep moving, guys. Not that one.
Well, that's the other variation of some of these stories is so it's either a story where the hitchhiker gives an address through which the motorist learns he has just given a ride to a ghost. There's also a story where it's an old woman who is foretelling disaster. A story where a girl is met at some place of entertainment instead of on the road. And also the stories where the hitchhiker is later identified as a local divinity. So some of them, there actually are male hitchhiker stories where it turns out it's Jesus.
Oh, it turns out just
Yeah.
coincidentally.
Guys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nobody believes you when you get home either. Hey, I just gave a lift to Jesus.
You never know.
Okay. So this Cabrini is actually pretty sweet. For one, her body is partially, what's it called? The incorrupt.
Oh, it
So like
has
a virgin.
She's
She's a virgin.
partially incorrupt. No. So she died in 1931, or she died. She
Oh,
died before that. Excuse me. Her body was exhumed in 1931, and more than half of her body hadn't changed. It's
Okay.
an
still
Wow.
looked as she did.
incorruptible saint, is
Right.
what Betsy
Okay,
says.
So
okay.
now
Yeah.
she's in glass in an altar at St. Francis Cabrini Shrine in Manhattan.
Wow.
But she actually cured a person of. So a dude was born and was given the wrong percentage of silver nitrate back in 1921. So he lost his. It ate away his tissue and his sight. And in 1939, right, one of those dates, she restored both the eye tissue and the sight by healing it, blessing it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
She's kind of a
So
badass.
So here's a story from Betsy. This is a follow-up about the Vanishing Hitchhiker in Oklahoma. It's near Fort Reno, which is one of her favorite places to investigate. There's a stretch of the old Route 66 that's supposed to be haunted, and a ghostly vagabond has been reported to wander the highway wearing a trench coat and a fedora. Ooh, styling. He is normally seen on rainy nights and usually ends up acting kind of chaotic. He has also been known to jump out in the middle of the road in front of cars, scaring the drivers so badly that they crash. Okay, so this is not the little boy. That's good to know.
No.
But still, that's
Okay.
another variation of some of these hitchhiker stories too.
Two things with this one, though.
Mhm.
One, vagabond is one of my favorite words.
I know, right? What a delicious word, vagabond.
And
Vagabond.
two, there's no way that entire Route 66 ain't haunted from California to the East Coast.
I will have to agree with you. That place is, I mean, it's a definitely, even the road itself is a piece of American history. It really is. But think of all the hot spots on there. So definitely check out some routes, get your kicks on Route 66.
66.
6D6. And yes, I did use a Dungeons and Dragons term, 66.
I know. You're just kind of keep moving on from that. So what?
Savage.
So what are some of the
I'm used to
other versions of the story, Whitney?
So I think one of the most popular ones, this is out of 79 accounts that Beardsley and Hankey ended up going through. They actually think that version 1, which is where the hitchhiker gives the address to the motorist, is the closest to the original form of the legend. And that versions 2 and 4 are more localized. So that would be the versions with the old woman and also the local divinity. So that's more like local history, like Mother Cabrini. And version 3 ends up being a separate ghost story that eventually combined with the original Vanishing Hitchhiker. And I think one of the most prominent versions of that particular story, where a ghost of a girl is met at a place of entertainment, is from your neck of the woods, Brandon, Resurrection Mary.
Yup. And that's why I was kind of shocked that they said that this was a separate story that combines with the Hitchhiker story, because there's no reports of her haunts anywhere else other than on that section of road.
On Archer Street, right? Archer Avenue.
Right.
Yeah. In I think Archer Avenue is not necessarily downtown Chicago, I don't think. I think it's
No. It's out. It's out a little bit.
Yeah.
I'll actually be in Chicago later this summer, and that's one of my if I can convince the Kelly to let me go drive it.
I think you totally should.
She said she's not interested.
I mean, well, it is kind of a creepy stretch of road.
It is. It is.
It's not in the best area.
And it's not as fun anymore because the building that started it, the entertainment, I can't think of what it's called right off the top of my head, isn't there anymore. They tore it down.
So basically, from what I can gather, there were several dance halls. Yeah, it was a couple of dance halls that was on that location in Archer Avenue. I believe one of the versions, it was called the O. Henry, and then another version, it was called the Willowbrook, the Willowbrook Ballroom. And I think it burned down. There was a fire, like in the 2000s.
They've had a few issues with it, but yeah, the Willowbrook is the main one.
Yeah.
But yes, the Willowbrook was the O. Henry originally.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually just outside of Chicago in Willow Springs, Illinois.
So what intrigues me about Resurrection Mary is that people are trying to find the real person behind the story, because you've got three very grounded, real places. You've got the ballroom, you've got the stretch of road, it's a real road, and you've got the cemetery. Resurrection Cemetery is a real place, and a lot of people are buried there. It's been around since the 19th century, so there's a lot of possibilities. And I think people have been actually really trying to find out who Resurrection Mary actually is. So
they think it's what is it, Mary Bregovy is
that's
who they're pushing most towards.
Yeah, that's one of the. She's the front runner.
She's the front runner, and then there's Anna Norkus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and I mean, what people are also trying to do is they're trying to find through the historical record the exact being of this individual, and nobody's going to get it all the way right. For example, Mary Bregovy, right age, right time period, the 1920s, 1930s, but Resurrection Mary has been reported to be a blonde. Mary Bregovy was brunette.
She also died in a car accident in downtown Chicago on the Loop, not out there, where Anna died in 1927 in a car accident, and she was actually on her way home from the ballroom.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot, and then there's also different kinds of oral traditions about. Everybody's getting this story from various sources, but there's several things that are in common. They're driving down the road, they see this girl, and they either pick her up and find out that she vanishes right when she gets in their seat, or she runs out into the middle of the road and they think they've hit her. I mean, it's a very interesting story. Yeah. And it's definitely one of the classics.
I wish I could go back in time to when things like dance halls and ballroom halls and things like that still existed.
Yeah.
Like, I was born in the wrong time era. I should have been born in the 20s and 30s. Aside from all the wars and things like that, I just love the fashion and the music and like kind of the way society kind of operated. And I don't know. It's very what's the word? Elegant, I think.
Yeah, it really is. I can see you. I can see you in a
you could,
fedora.
right? Yeah.
I can see it. Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
Totes. Totally.
So one of the things that you'll want to check when you go, and I know everybody when they're in Chicago are going to go check it out.
Mm-hmm.
So when you go to the cemetery, there's a section on the gate that you need to look for. Because there is a handprint burned into the gates.
What?
The people that run the cemetery try to say that it's from a car accident where a car crashed into the gates. You can see it clear as a bell on it, but it looks like handprints burned into it.
That's crazy.
So the sad thing is with all these dance halls and stuff disappearing, there hasn't been a real documented appearance of her since 1989.
Right. And actually it showed up on Unsolved Mysteries at that time too. They had an episode they had a section in one of the episodes where they did talk about Resurrection Mary, all the different versions up to that point. Really interesting. Yeah. And If anybody wants to actually go more into depth about behind the Resurrection Mary story, for one thing, Pleasing Terrors podcast did an episode called Resurrection, in which they really go into the Resurrection Mary story with one episode. But if you want it spread out more and get more deep dive, I recommend Astonishing Legends. They did a 4-part series on Resurrection Mary alone. So.
Oh wow. Okay. So
Check
there's
it
a
out.
lot of information in there. Yeah.
I'll do you
Yes.
one better. How about
Oh.
this? How about this? We're gonna sweeten that pot a little bit tonight.
Oh.
So if any of our listeners are in the Chicago area while I'm there, we'll plan a trip and we'll all go together.
I want
Ooh,
pictures.
cool.
So
Yeah.
we'll make it a para unity field trip.
Be careful
Cool.
though. Be careful out there. Pay attention to where you're driving. You're still on a road, and from what I've heard, it's a pretty dark road. So just be careful, guys, if you do that. And also, don't break into the cemetery.
No.
Don't do that.
No. We'll plan on doing it during the day
Okay.
because one, she doesn't appear anymore,
Mm-hmm.
and we can drive up and down Archer Avenue all we want. We ain't gonna find her. But we're gonna go out to the cemetery and we're gonna find the handprint on the gate.
I was going to say you got to go find the handprint on the gate.
We got it. We'll do the
I'd
gate.
like to see a picture of that.
Yeah,
I have a
me
picture
too.
of it.
Or you could do it like, in Stephen King's Rose Red, where the doctor collects a whole bunch of like psychics and people who have like, psychic talents and things like that to reactivate Rose Red. Maybe, just maybe, Brandon, you can gather a bunch of psychics and intuitives, get them all together, take them down the road and reactivate Resurrection Mary. Just a suggestion.
I mean, I'm not necessarily opposed, but
That's kind of wild.
my biggest issue with it is if we tried to reanimate Resurrection Mary, she's gonna end up going home with somebody.
Good for further study. You could,
No,
then get a couple of
no.
Ghostbusters as well. An exorcist maybe can come along.
Tune in to
Go out
our
there, get
next.
the hard proof. Get the hard proof. Yeah, tune into the next episode where Brandon is possessed by Resurrection Mary.
Tune into our next episode where we really go in depth with thought forms. It's
Maybe
what I-
maybe they'll like my legs better.
Maybe.
Maybe you should do this for your son's graduation party.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
But actually, he's connected to that whole Chicago thing, so
There you go. Ooh,
Yeah.
funny. Anyway,
so maybe I'll make him go and touch it since he's
What
going
about
off to
you?
college anyways.
What about you, Xander? Have you heard any more of these vanishing hitchhiker stories in your neck of the woods?
Yes. So I knew about the Vanishing Hitchhiker legend in South Africa, but I never really knew all of the details until you guys invited me to come and be on the episode, and I decided to look into it. What's interesting, you mentioned that I think it was Resurrection Mary that's on Willow Road, or what was it?
Archer Avenue.
Archer. You mentioned a willow road, or like
Willowbrook
the
Ballroom.
Willow, yeah.
Willowbrook Ballroom. So maybe there's a connection to places that are named after Willow, because in South Africa there's the Uniondale Hitchhiker. Uniondale is it's this tiny little town, and when I say tiny little town, we're talking South African tiny little towns, and a tiny little town in South Africa can be like on one side of the street, literally. No exaggeration. There's a place in South Africa famous during the Boer War. It's called Maatjiesfontein. And no exaggeration, the entire town is on one side of the road and the other side is just open field. So when we say small town in South Africa, we mean small, like blink and you'll miss it. So there's this place in South Africa called Uniondale. It's in a part of South Africa that we call the Little Karoo, which is a semi-desert region. We've got the Great Karoo right at the top, up to where the border of Namibia and Botswana are. And then below that is the Little Karoo. So it's like semi-desert, it's like semi-arid. It's part of the province that I come from, so it's part of the Western Cape province. The town itself was formed in 1856 by joining two towns together. So you can imagine, like, if that little town and that little town are so small that we might as well just join them together and make a slightly bigger town. But its primary claim to fame actually is this ghost story. And what I actually didn't know is that this ghost story has been turned into a movie in South Africa. There's songs that have been written about this ghost story. I had no idea. The movie's in Afrikaans, so if anybody speaks Afrikaans, or if you speak any Dutch or Flemish for that matter, you could probably go onto YouTube and find the movie and watch it. I don't know if it has subtitles. Basically, this one is also a young lady, and it was in the stormy weather of an Easter weekend in 1968. And this young engaged couple, they had a car accident as they were driving through the Little Karoo. And it's on a stretch of road that is called the Barrendas and Willmore Road. So, sorry, Willowmore Road. So there's the Willow connection.
There's the Willow, yep.
Yeah, and it's about 20 kilometers outside of the town of Uniondale. And the woman who was in the car, her name was Maria Charlotte Roux. She was sleeping in the back of their Volkswagen. How do you guys say that? Do you say Volkswagen?
Volkswagen.
Okay, so we say it the right way.
Yes.
It's Volkswagen. So they were in the back of the Volkswagen, the little Beetle. You know, those little original 1980s,
We call them
sorry,
punch
1960s.
buggies.
Yeah, the little punch buggies. Gorgeous little cars. Such awesome little cars. So vintage. But she was basically sleeping in the back seat of their little Volkswagen Beetle, and her fiance lost control of the car, and the car overturned, and she was killed, unfortunately. So then after that event happened, the first reported sighting was in 1976. So that's like what, a good 7 years later, 8 years later, 9 years later. That's how good my math is. And it was again on the Easter weekend. And since then, there have been many other sightings of her. But the first one that ever happened was in 1976. And they all involve this female hitchhiker who the people pull over, they stop to give her a lift. And then a few kilometers later down the street, she's just disappeared from the back of the car. And some people have reported that they can feel the temperature of the air in the car actually change, and it gets very, very chilly. Other people have reported that they can hear like a laughter happening in the back of the car, and then when they turn around, she's not there. One of the interesting ones that I read was about a guy who was pulled over by the police, like a traffic cop, on this little stretch of road because he was speeding, and the traffic cop pulled him over, you know, obviously because you're speeding.
Yeah.
And while the guy was talking to the traffic cop and inevitably getting in trouble, he saw the traffic cop's face go absolutely pale. And he was like, "What?" And the traffic cop said to him that he just saw your back door just opened, closed, and a girl appeared and then disappeared in the back of your car again. And you still got to wonder that the traffic, I mean, it's South Africa, so he probably still did get the fine. Like, you would think they would get you let off. And then one of the more recent ones was in 1980. That's about the most recent report I can find of it. And this was a motorcyclist, and he was, again, it was driving through the Karoo. And the ghost, again, is said to be this woman who had died many, many years before. And close to Uniondale, there was this guy called Andre Coetzee. He was in his 20s, and he was breezing along the road on Good Friday. So it all happens around the Easter weekend. And the quote from him says that he was riding near the Barrendas turnoff, which is the site where the fatal accident happened a decade before. And he felt the hair on his head just like stand up inside of his helmet. He felt the hair on his head just stand up. And he felt somebody put their arms around him from behind him on the bike. And he said that he could just feel that there was somebody sitting behind him on his bike, somebody who hadn't been there before. He said that he accelerated to 80 miles an hour to try and get away from whatever weirdness was behind him. But the ghost hit him on the back of his helmet 3 times. And he said it was like this really vicious blow, like really, really whacking on his helmet. And as soon as he reached 100 miles per hour on his motorbike, the apparition just completely disappeared behind him. And the first thing he did, you know, obviously being somewhat freaked out, is that he drove to a local cafe, a little coffee shop along the stretch of road, because you get these weird little like coffee shops all the way along the road. And he drove to a coffee shop along the road. He could hardly speak. He was very, very shaken by what happened, understandably so. And he went and spoke to the owner of the cafe. Her name was Jeanette Meyer. And she was the one who said to him, like, yeah, there's this ghost on the road that haunts like motorcyclists and people driving in their cars. So there have been 7 or so reports of it over time. All of them say that it's a young woman. All of them say she appears in the back of the car, but then she completely disappears. And they all say that she was blonde. So watch out for blonde girls, because they will haunt you later in life.
I love the cafe lady was just like, yeah, there's a ghost that haunts
Yeah,
us.
casually. She's like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Don't worry about that.
And do
yeah.
you want your piece of pie?
Want your cup of Joe?
I
Now,
did
is
try and
there
look for
any-
ones in China as well, but I couldn't find any hitchhiking ghosts in China. Not that I could find. I don't know if anybody else maybe found one. As far as I know, though, hitchhiking here is illegal, so maybe that's why.
Ah, and that's actually a very interesting point. Well, maybe I don't necessarily have China, but I do also, except for that one story that probably went all the way back past communism, basically. I do have something from the Philippines, and there's a really cool website called Positively Filipino. And there is a story about what they call the White Lady. And this is, yeah.
Colonialism.
Called the White Lady because she's dressed in a flowing white dress.
Okay.
She's dressed in a beautiful white dress. This one follows the formula of picking her up, taking her to an address, she vanishes, and then you basically go to check back on her. Like you'll go back to that location and be like, so I dropped this girl off here. She disappeared. She says she lives here. And then finding out it's somebody that had lived there long ago. Okay. Well, the White Lady is said to haunt a particular stretch of road in, I'm going to mispronounce this, in Quezon City. It is called the White Lady of Balete or Banyan Drive. And she's said to be the victim of a car accident, or she's said to be a woman who died on the side of the road after being raped by Japanese soldiers in World War II.
Okay. Gosh.
So I find that very interesting because what seems to be happening is there's so much focus on these desolate areas or these women that are in these vulnerable situations. And that, I think, does a great deal to discourage hitchhiking as time went by. So at least in the United States, in the 50s, 60s, and even into the 70s, hitchhiking was very common in the United States. But as you get closing in on the end of the 70s and going into the 80s, then you're starting to see these stories take a darker turn. Like, for example, and I know this is a comedy, but it scared the crap out of me when I was a little kid. Pee-wee's Big Adventure and Large Marge scared the shit out of me when I was. You don't want to deal with that. And it really does speak to a lot of fears that people are having when they're dealing with, you never know who you're going to run into on these roads.
Yeah.
And also when you're talking about, I've also noticed that some of these stories, they really, when they're confined to a certain location, it does kind of tap into some of the history of what happened. The Philippines was definitely under Japanese occupation during World War II, and atrocious things happened.
Of course.
Not just with the Japanese, but also even with the American forces. We did some pretty shitty things over there too. And I think a lot of those fears get tied up into the folklore, and there's a way to get them out. So, yeah.
Well, the Japanese themselves, they got a lot of hitchhiking spirits anyways. So like
they do, yeah.
2011, they had that big tsunami, right?
Oh yeah,
from Fukushima.
Yep,
that was from Fukushima, right?
Yeah. And they had a huge uptick in ghostly passengers. They said that essentially it was like having a ghost ship pull up to shore, and all these spirits were coming out and getting rides all over.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
okay. Trying to get places.
Yeah. That's a fascinating story too. I've actually heard about that. The new Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix actually did an episode about the tsunami called Tsunami Spirits. And
I saw an article just yesterday. I didn't read it, but I saw an article just yesterday talking about the ghosts that have around the Fukushima incident. Yeah.
And if you think about it, I mean, I can't speak for every single one, but a taxi driver sees a lot. They deal with everybody, from the richest person all the way to somebody who's poor. I mean, they deal with just about everybody in society. And so they learn to be very grounded. At least I would hope they learn to be very grounded, because not only are they dealing with all these different people, but this is their job. Their job is to get you from point A to point B in the best way possible. And I don't think they're the kind of people that would exaggerate a story like this, particularly in an area where people they knew were literally wiped off the face of the earth.
Yes.
Well, and you got to give taxi drivers a lot of credit too, because those taxi drivers that are getting stuck with these vanishing hitchhikers, they ain't getting paid.
They ain't getting paid, man.
They're not getting paid. And the funny thing,
most disrespectful ghost out there is the vanishing hitchhiker,
right?
Because they get a free ride and they don't pay for it.
But if you think, if you're looking for hard proof, they start the meter.
Exactly.
Oh, right. Yeah.
They
So
start
they're
the meter, and
right,
then
yeah.
when they stop and look and see that this person is gone, and there's no way that that person could have jumped out of the car without their noticing it, the meter's still running.
Yeah. And it's not like it's not going to be like a work scam where you go in and say like, hey, yeah, well, I had my meter running, but the guy in the back literally disappeared, so I'm going to need you guys to pay the difference. If anything, they would end up having to pay into the company for funds that are missing from the taxi. Oh, maybe stopping out and buying a Coke along the way and being like, no, really, it was a ghost. He disappeared. It just gone. And that's why there's money missing from the caddy,
Ooh. Yeah, that's
the other one. Speaking of Japan, though, don't forget about the slit-mouthed woman.
Oh, Kuchisake Onna.
Yeah.
Kuchisake Onna. So now we're dealing with another variation of the Vanishing Hitchhiker. It's now expanding to the figure by the side of the road. That's just kind of walking. And that one is a nasty one, because
that one scares the shit out of me. Just
why?
Put that one out there. She walks around with a mask on, asking people if she looks pretty.
Yes.
And then she rips the mask off, and that's what you see.
Yeah.
No.
There's a couple of variations of that.
There's
that
a lot
ghost
of
in Japan, though. Yeah, in Japan specifically, there's a few.
That's why you don't give compliments.
So there's, however, if you insult her, then she's just going to kill you.
Yeah.
She's going to kill you regardless.
But if you give her a compliment, she'll take her mask off and just kill you anyway. So it's a lose-lose.
She'll make you look like her. So here's what you do. You say, you look average. I'm serious. Because also, if the story of Kuchisake Onna, it's actually been around since the days of kabuki. I mean, it's based off kabuki. Kabuki theater. So you're looking at maybe the Edo period. So you're looking at, let's say 1600s. My Japanese history is mostly based on the Meiji Restoration. So that's late 19th century going into the 20th. But a spirit that dates from the Edo period is not going to know what it means to say that you're average.
Okay.
They're probably not going to get that. So it'll give you time to sort of get away.
Get the fuck out of there. Yeah.
Well, are you literally trying to imply that if you walk up to her, she asks if you look pretty, and you say, you look average. Do you really think she's going to sit there and be like,
yeah. Not really knowing what to do with that information, being like,
pretty much. Yeah. Well, I'd rather deal with her than a Hanako of the toilet, but that's beside the point.
Fair. Very fair.
Yeah.
I don't play with toilet ghosts.
Toilet ghosts are fun, but that's an episode for another time.
No, it's not.
Scary things that happen in your toilet.
I mean,
shitty
Shitty things that happen in your toilet. Yeah.
Gross. And here's our potty humor for the day. But okay, so seriously, guys, what do you think is the appeal of the Vanishing Hitchhiker? What do you think it says about us?
Well, I mean, like you said, they always seem to happen on these like kind of very isolated stretches of road. They're always going to happen at nighttime. And again, being from rural South Africa and having driven many, many isolated stretches of road at the weirdest hours. I mean, to get from the city to where I lived, you have to go over 2 mountains. You know what I mean? Like that's an average drive in South Africa. You are very vulnerable at that time. So, I mean, if your car breaks down while you're out there on an isolated rural country road, you don't know when the next car is going to come along. So you're in a very vulnerable position. So I wonder if it maybe is rooted in that we feel very vulnerable and exposed out there. And your imagination kind of runs away with you, and you think you see a flash of something out the corner of your eye. Actually, that reminds me. So where I grew up in South Africa is it's the world famous. I hope you've heard of it now that I've said that. It's the world famous. It's called Chapman's Peak Drive. It's a very, very beautiful drive. Beautiful mountain drive. It was actually carved out of the mountain in, I'm going to say sometime in the 1800s, so like the 19th century, by Portuguese prisoners of war. And I mean, if you've seen this stretch of mountain, like, they didn't exactly have massive machinery back then. So Portuguese prisoners of war having to carve a road out of the side of a mountain of very precarious cliffs. Kudos to those guys for the job they did. But the way that the road kind of winds around the mountain means that if you're kind of standing, or if you're on one part of the road with all the twists and turns, you can actually see very far down the road, even though it's winding around a mountain, because of just the line of sight, right? And again, weirdly, Volkswagen Beetle, this little Volkswagen Bug, came driving past us. It was a red one, and it never continued down the road. Like it came past us around one corner, and that was the last we ever saw of it. We didn't see it driving further down the road. As we progressed down the road, it wasn't stopped along the side of the road anywhere. So I was like, where did that car go? And one of the first things you do is start looking over the edge, because cars tumble down into the sea all the time, or tumble down, onto the rocks. And it was never there. It was just gone. And then just at the foot of Chapman's Peak, there's right where I grew up, there's this beautiful stretch of beach called Long Beach. It's a completely, I come from a completely undeveloped part of South Africa. It's actually part of a nature reserve, so it's never going to be developed either. This beautiful, beautiful long stretch of beach. And one night there was a bunch of us all sitting around having a campfire on top of one of the sand dunes, as you do when you're in your youth. And we looked over and we saw a group of 6 black-robed people walking down the beach carrying a coffin between them. So it was like almost like a funeral procession. And of course, we'd all been taking a little bit of weed and things like that. So the first person who sees it, you think like, oh, wow, my stone brain is just messing with me, right? Every single person that was sitting on that sand dune saw those guys walking down the beach. One of our braver friends got up and ran down to go and see what the hell, because the procession had kind of gone around a corner of the sand dune, ran down. They were gone. Absolutely. I swear on my life, the story is true. 6 black-robed monk-looking figures carrying a coffin or some sort of a box on their shoulders between them, walked straight past us, around, and went around the corner of us, and were just gone. I actually told the story on Jim Harold's paranormal podcast as well when I was a guest on there.
I love campfire tales.
Yeah, it was.
So
I told the story. Nothing. It was, I mean, I can't tell you if they left footprints or not. Not something that we looked for, but also on a beach like that with windswept and how many people walk up and down the beach. Nothing like that stands out in my head. I can't ever remember checking to see if they did, so I don't know. But it was either a mass hallucination, like 8 of us actually saw the same hallucination and this weirdness walking down the beach, or it actually happened. And what are the chances of 8 stone teenagers thinking they saw some ghosts? But you know what I mean?
Well, it's interesting.
It was weird.
Well, it's interesting. That's another aspect of people trying to explain these vanishing hitchhikers is this a case of roadway hypnosis? Because you're all these stories take place in the dark on these desolate roads, one person driving alone, probably just kind of la 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 la. I mean, there is something to be said by that.
I've absolutely experienced driving hypnosis before. And in fact, actually, while driving through the Little Karoo, which is where the Uniondale Ghost happens. So, I mean, it's this, super, super long stretch of road that never seems to end, completely desolate as well. But they've placed rocks along the side of the road. Obviously, I don't know why, because you'd think if somebody's going to veer off the road, it's probably safer just to veer off into a desert and eventually come to a stop rather than smash into a rock on the side of the road. But I digress. You'd think. But no, they've put these rocks, but they're placed at such even intervals that it becomes hypnotic to drive, because it's going, and you can imagine the sound and the visual, it's just going boop, 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 as you're driving. So it's this like rhythmic visual auditory thing that you actually, I mean, it actually makes you sleepier. Like you're trying to stay awake driving through a lot of nothing, and you've got this like very rhythmic doop, 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 and it kind of puts you into this like exactly.
That's what Betsy was.
It kind of puts you into this hypnotic state while you're driving, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe it is. I still think it's got something to do with feeling isolated and vulnerable out in the middle of nowhere in these, isolated parts of the road at night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it
Brandon
could
is gearing up
be,
to say something.
like the same type of thing too, like you were talking about. They could be lonely people too.
Mhm.
You think about take Resurrection Mary. A lot of those guys are coming home. Well, the most famous story is the cab driver, but a lot of the people that picked her up were people coming home from the night from going out dancing or doing whatever. There's a report of one of them from early on of her that he actually met her
at the club.
And they were dancing and they kissed and they left together, and she went poof on him when they went by the cemetery.
Yep.
She ghosted him.
I told you this is romantic. Oh.
But that's the worst one, because I mean, not only are you ghosted by the ghost, but you have to live with the fact that you were making out with her.
Yeah. And then she still ghosted you like you weren't good enough. You know what I mean? She's like, oh, not this one.
I think what
you have been rejected.
I think what they say she said is, where I'm going, you can't follow me.
Right.
Oh, wow. Okay. Creepy much?
Yeah. And apparently this guy was like, I know this story. This guy apparently was working with an undertaker or something, or he had been studying something with that. And the way she felt to him felt ice cold, holding the hand of a corpse.
Like dead. Yeah. Yeah. I was just wondering though, so there's a lot of, I mean, the ghosts that we know of are all on existing roads, right? Like roads that are still there. But I wonder if there are any hitchhiker ghosts that are on roads that are no longer in use or have been covered up or have been whatever, the land has been taken back and there's just no longer a road where there used to be a road. And now you've got a ghost standing in the middle of a field somewhere.
I would say that's pretty
not
likely.
Getting anywhere. Yeah.
No, I think they appear and they look around and they just kind of go, fuck. And they just...
Well, that might say something. I mean, if these vanishing hitchhiking ghosts are real, or, as we define reality, then that means these could be residual haunts.
Yeah. Because you always, I mean, you hear about ghosts passing through walls and then because that's a residual haunting, right? And that's a ghost moving through a space where there previously was no wall and there might have been a doorway or a passageway or something, and the place has since been renovated.
Possibly.
So I got to wonder if there's any hitchhiking ghosts out there that are residually haunting just an open field where there used to be a road.
Yeah, Betsy just said there's a place called Dead Woman's Crossing in Oklahoma.
Oh, wow.
That's ominous.
Not at all foreboding. Yeah.
Well, another thing that's really interesting about the evolution of the hitchhiking story is, as I said, in the 70s and 80s, this story starts to get a little darker. It starts adding in the elements of, the killer in the back seat of the car or something like that. And, it heightens that fear. It heightens that, again, of being vulnerable. And you just never know when something's going to happen next. Well, before that, it's all about, it seems like there was more of a sense of community. People were more inclined to actually stop and help another person, particularly stop and help a young woman who's on the side of the road. So I think, so that seems to be a very interesting way to sort of look at and analyze how this tale has sort of developed over the years. You need each other.
Yeah.
And
I'm actually surprised that there aren't more, or maybe just because we've been like researching a very specific term about it being like a hitchhiking ghost or a ghost like while you're in a car or a cart or whatever. I know you mentioned the one about the priest and the lady on the side of the road who walked with them to a tavern. But like if you think about, like, let's take for example like the Roman roads, right? The Roman roads across the UK, which are now buried under meters and meters of earth. But I mean, their highway systems crisscrossed. I mean, you know, that's what they were known for, right? The Romans built the roads, but they also built all of their mausoleums and things along the road as we were heading on into a town. So I wonder if maybe these origins come from something like that, where you have actual burials along the side of the street, and it would have been very weird and kind of creepy to walk past all mausoleums and burials in the dark in the middle of the night as you're heading into this little village or whatever. Surrounded by dead people. So I wonder how far back, if you start looking into it, that maybe people were seeing apparitions on the side of the road that might have been linked to these kind of like Roman burials and things that were on the side of the streets way back when in 180 or whatever. Yeah.
So this dead woman crossing.
Oh.
It's
I'd love to see the road sign for that.
Right. Well, I did see Crazy Woman Creek out in Wyoming. So, but it's in an unincorporated community on the Deer Creek, northeast of Weatherford in Custer County, Oklahoma. The community takes its name from the unsolved murder of a local woman. So, in July 1905, a gal named Katie DeWitt James filed for divorce. The next day, her and her 14-month-old daughter, Lulu, went to a train station. She was going to visit her cousin who lived in Ripley. Her father came to say goodbye, and her husband obviously didn't come to the station. A few weeks later, Henry was concerned because he hadn't heard from his daughter. They contacted the sheriff. Nobody remembered seeing her or the baby. In 1905, they learned that the woman and her baby spent the night in a house of a man called William Moore. They were brought to this house by the Moore's sister-in-law, whose name was Fanny Norton. She was a resident of the city and known as a sex worker. In the morning, Norton, James, and the baby left in a buggy, and eyewitnesses reported that the buggy entered a field near Deer Creek, and Norton came out alone about 45 minutes later. So they discovered that 2 women and the baby were seen around Deer Creek. The detectives were able to find the baby. The witnesses testified that Norton left the baby with a boy and asked him to take the baby home. The baby wasn't harmed, but her clothes were covered in blood.
Oh, dear.
They looked and looked and looked. They tracked down Norton, who denied that she had murdered James. Later that day, she killed herself. And then in August of 1905, so 2 months later, they found her remains near Deer Creek, about 20 miles east of Clinton. Her head was severed, and her father confirmed that was his daughter, and its murder's never been solved.
Whoa. I think we all know who done it, though, right? I mean, like...
It sounds pretty...
Thanks for getting dark on us, Betsy.
You knew Betsy was going to do it. You knew that. It's Betsy. Thank you, Betsy.
So now the question is then, at this dead woman crossing, is there reports of her walking back out of the field or asking for a ride to go see her father or her cousin or her uncle or whoever she was visiting?
Or maybe she's just looking for somebody to solve.
Or she's
case.
looking for her baby.
Murder, yeah.
Or looking for the baby. Yeah. That's devastating. Oh, man. Yeah. Well, I hate to, this is a somber note, and I think there's a lot of somber things we can take from the Vanishing Hitchhiker story, but let's end on, Betsy does say that there have been sightings of this unfortunate woman, and also welcome to Oklahoma. is what she says.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, also on a lighter note, we do know of some lighter versions of the hitchhiking ghost. Kind of the reverse hitchhiker of Large Marge, but also Disney with the hitchhiking ghosts at the Haunted Mansion. Hey,
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that.
Hey, beware of hitchhiking ghosts. And here you go, pass the beer, and they're the ghosts sitting right on top of you. Or in my case, they were sitting on top of my head when I was 9.
Terrifying.
Actually, to a 9-year-old, that was pretty scary.
Yeah.
Yay, Disney.
I really have been reflecting a lot lately. I think those of us who were born in the 70s and 80s, we are interminably effed up.
Just damaged people. Yeah. No, I totally agree. Yeah.
We can wax poetic about that another time. Xander,
yeah,
you are awesome. I finally got to meet you at this.
Yay! So we're going to do this again next week. What's next week's topic? I'll write it down. I'll start researching right now.
We will have Lapaka Kapanui from Hawaii on, talking about
I don't
Hawaii
know what
legend.
that means.
He is
name.
He is one of the most, and actually, I'm going to ask him to tell his hitchhiking ghost story about Madame Pele.
Oh,
because she's been the topic of some hitchhiking ghost stories, and I definitely want to hear that. We had Lapaka Kapanui, first episode this season. He blew Brandon's mind. We all fell in love with him, so we're going to welcome him back as their episode, their season closer, and just give him free reign.
You would like it, Xander, because they have these things there called night marchers, and you can't do anything to stop them from marching. And they will go through your house if your house is built on the path that they're marching on.
Okay.
You can't do a
Just
damn
straight
thing
on
about
through.
it. And they said the only way that you can keep them from hurting you or carrying you off is you have to strip down buck naked and lay face down on the ground while they pass you.
Yep.
That explains why I've been doing that all of these years. I never knew why.
Now you know.
I thought I was just being quirky.
Oh no, you're protecting yourself. And just maybe you will have an ancestor in the Night Marcher train that will vouch for you.
Oh yeah, if you have an ancestor in the train, they won't touch you.
Okay, good.
No promises though.
No,
so basically be a Brandon.
Think of any Hawaiian ancestors that I might have. I'm racking my brains, but coming up with nothing.
But yeah, he's our last episode for the season. So guys, Para family, yes, please do. And thank you for joining us on this episode of the Para Unity podcast. And if you like us, please listen to us. Please rate us 5 stars on iTunes or leave us a review wherever you listen to us, because we definitely need the feedback in order to make the show better. Isn't that right, Brandon?
That is correct, Whitney. And if you're an Android listener, you can follow us on Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, or simply say, Alexa, play the Para Unity podcast.
That is the best thing ever. I swear to God.
But say it like that. Say it like you're possessed like a demon, like Brandon just did.
Well, I yelled at her last time, and I got yelled at by our guest, so I figured we'd make it a little bit darker now. Maybe if you give her the thumbs up.
Yes.
Anyway.
The Hitchhiker.
She'll turn it on for you so you can listen to the episodes you want. If you want to be a guest on the show, or you want more Para Unity, visit us on our Facebook or Instagram pages. If you want to help support the show, stop by the website and buy us a coffee. But as always, my name is Brandon.
And my name is Whitney, and you have been in the place to bring our paranormal family a little closer together, the Para Unity podcast. Thanks to everybody in the chat, and good night.
Good night.